We are in our last lesson on the subject of joy or happiness. And some of you know that we have been taking those lessons this summer since about the end of June, the last Sunday in June until now. And I hope you're smiling more, although I suspect you may struggle right now to go back and think of any one particular lesson on the subject of joy. And yet I will tell you, as I think back, there are some things we've talked about that I have found to be important to me. Maybe you remember back at the very beginning of this study, we found Paul praying in Philippians chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. And he said, I pray that you may know what is important, what is not important, and that you may choose what is important. Did you remember that? And I've really thought about it several times. What is really important here and what's not so important? And let's do the important. And then maybe remember this idea that if you're going to be happy, joyful, you got to always kind of remember that God is always present and He's always working. And we talked about pride and selfishness, how they're enemies to happiness, and the way of Jesus is exactly opposite of that. And maybe you remember that lesson about do's and don'ts, how some people in religion and Christianity approach it all on do's and don'ts, and it literally drives away happiness and makes us kind of miserable. And instead, we have this theology where we look at what Jesus has done for us, and we're so compelled by what He's done that we want to serve Him, we want to follow Him. And then even last week, we talked about how gentleness affects happiness and worry and thinking. And this week, the subject may be even more difficult to apply to our lives. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's similar to thinking, and maybe it has something to do with thinking. Maybe it has something to do with worry. But it's not easy for you to grab this concept. So I'm glad you're here this morning. I know we have a lot of people gone. I knew coming into this Sunday we would have a lot of people gone. So many people said they were going to family reunions and going to different things. You know what? That shouldn't make any difference. Whether we have 5 or 500 or 5,000, we're here for the same reason. And we're here to encourage one another and spur one another on. I'm not sure how encouraging this is going to be, though. I want you to look at the word that we're going to be considering this morning as it relates to happiness. The word contentment. Kind of has to do with whether or not you're satisfied with life. And I wonder, as you ponder that word for a moment, just staring at that word for a little while, how well you're doing with that. And my guess is that some of you are going to say, there are moments in my life when I am satisfied and I'm content, and there are other moments in my life where I am not satisfied at all. Now, that has nothing to do with aspirations. That has nothing to do with dreams. It has to do with the fact that maybe your aspirations or your dreams have not yet been realized, and here you are not yet receiving those. Can you be satisfied where you are at this moment in time where God has you? Is that making sense? But here's how it kind of works. I look at my house and I think, I don't like the kitchen. And I don't like how it's kind of laid out, and I'm kind of tired of it. And I really don't like the location. And the more I think about it, the more dissatisfied I become. Or, I'm not too satisfied with my job right now. And I'm not too satisfied with my income right now. Or I'm not too satisfied with, and you can make that list as long as you want. You may even say, I'm not too satisfied with my spouse right now. I'm not too satisfied with my school right now. All of you understand what I'm saying? And what makes it worse is when you start comparing yourself to other people. And we're taught not to do that, and yet we keep doing it. And so you get around and you drive around in some neighborhood, or you go to some other nearby city and you drive in a neighborhood and you see these houses and you think, now that's exactly what I want. And I want it located exactly like this one is located. Or you look at someone else's job and you look at someone else's income and you look at someone else's health setting, and how well are you doing at living a life of contentment, of being satisfied with where you are? And you may be saying, well, is it even possible to live a contented life where most of the time I'm contented? I'm not going to say it's 100% of the time. I'm going to say that there are moments and there are spaces and places and time that we just say, I don't know if I can bear this. But most of the time, is it possible for us to live satisfied lives? Well, if I listen to Paul in Philippians chapter 4, he's going to say it's possible. He's literally going to say it's possible. And so I want you to begin with me in chapter 4, beginning in verse 10. We'll go through verse 13. Verses 11, 12, and 13 you know really well, especially verse 13 you know really well. Verse 10, though, sets kind of the context for those other verses. So look at what Paul says beginning in verse 10. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Now, I don't know what kind of situation Paul was in. Maybe it has something to do with that Roman prison. I don't know what his situation was. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. Now, that's an important line, because what he's saying is, I've been in a mess. I've had a situation going on where I've needed a lot of help. I needed someone to pay attention to me. I needed someone to come along beside me. And you finally gotten to a place where you can come and do that. I know you wanted to, but you just couldn't. Now, everybody understand that? He's not berating these people. He's not complaining about these people. He's saying this has just been the situation. This has been the reality. But though you couldn't do it, and you just now are able to do it, I need you to know something really important about my life. This is what he's going to be saying. I need all of you to know something really, really important. And what he's going to tell them that he wants them to know that's really, really important is something I want to get that's really, really important in my life. So he says this. I'm not saying this because I am in need. Now, I suspect he had needs. I'm not saying it because of I was totally miserable. I'm saying it, I want you to know this. I have learned to be content, satisfied, whatever the circumstance. Do you hear that? I have learned to be content or satisfied, whatever the circumstances might be. Have you learned that yet? I've not learned that yet. And so he continues to say, and he defines some of the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. And I know what it is to have plenty. Do you know the same thing? In your life, do you know the same thing? I suspect every one of us here knows what that feels like. I know what it is to be kind of in a mess, and I know what it is to be out of the mess. I've had it both ways. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. Can you imagine anyone saying that? I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. whether it's being well-fed or it's being absolutely hungry. Now, I'm telling you, how can you be content when you're hungry? When you can't pay the bills to keep your house cool? How can you be content? I've learned to be content whether I'm living in plenty or I'm living in want or need. I'm beginning to get confused by this, aren't you? How does anybody do this? And now the last verse. I can do this through him who gives me strength. Or if you're reading out of the old King James Version, it might say something like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Is that a familiar verse to you? Have you seen that on billboards? Have you seen that on t-shirts? Have you seen that maybe on a bumper sticker? But I kind of wish we would put it in context this morning, because it's so often taken a bit out of context and sometimes a long ways out of context. I've learned how to be content because of that. Now, here's the first word I want you to really think about. The word learned. You see, none of this comes naturally, does it? Like we've said so many times, this living in the kingdom of Jesus is countercultural. It's countercultural. There are so many things in this life that what we do routinely in this world, then we step over or we are born over into the world of the kingdom, and it's all different. And we're trying to live differently. And it doesn't feel right, and it's hard to accomplish. And Paul seems to be saying there was a time in my life when I couldn't say this. It didn't come naturally. There was a time in my life when a lot of places I was dissatisfied. But I had to learn it. I had to learn it. You and I have to learn how to be content, regardless of the circumstances. I suspect there are circumstances right now that you don't like. Susan and I have been talking over the last couple of days about life as we know it at this very moment. And it's troubling. Maybe more to her than to me, but still troubling. Because in her words, everything is changing. So much change this very summer. And so her mother passes away, a big change that's still not over. And today, our oldest grandson will be moving into the dormitories. And a massive, radical change for that family and for us. And this week, our oldest granddaughter will drive through Oklahoma City and spend a couple of nights with us, or one night at least, and she'll be going off to Northeastern Oklahoma State University to begin her second year in optometry school, and it's her last summer. She just lived her last summer at home. Never again. They go year-round now for 3 years. And the massive change that we're feeling with that. And then you look here, and the Millers were here, and the Millers were gone. It's a change. And thankfully, the McKees are here, but the McKees are changing. Unless I can wreck that somehow. So much has changed. Do you understand that? And it's unsettling. And you think, well, what's going to happen next? Have you ever felt like that? What's right around the corner? I don't know, but it will be change. It will be change. That's a part of life. It's an everyday part of life. And somehow I have to learn in this space to to be satisfied where I am. To be satisfied. I mean, Scott was in the emergency room this week with his mother. We were there. And he said, Mom's having chest pains, but we're not going to do anything. No matter what they say, we're not going to do anything. And all of us kids have talked about it, and she's talked about it, not going to do anything. We go into her room, Susan and I, and she kind of reiterates that. We're not going to do anything. This is the way life works. And I'm thinking, wow. And I'm telling you, his mother looked like she walked out of a beauty shop. And she was just bright, and she was just shiny, and they didn't know if she was fixing to collapse with her heart. And I'm thinking, that's probably the right attitude in all this. But I got to learn it. Am I making sense to you? So several years ago, I read this principle. The scarcity principle. I was reading this book. It was called, I think the book's title was Daring Greatly, and some of you may have heard me talk about it. I really liked the book. In the first few pages, the author identified this principle and then spent the rest of the book applying it in various areas of our lives. This author said that the number one cultural problem we have in America is the scarcity principle. And I thought, before I read any farther, I might as well take this book like I've done so many others and toss it. Because I thought that's not the number one cultural problem in America. What do you think the number one cultural problem is in America? I might say it's selfishness. I might say it's narcissism. I might say it's this attitude about people saying, what about me? How's this going to affect me? And it's all about me. Those are the big problems, I think. She said, no, that's the problem. And she defined the problem. She said, what we have now in America is a group of people, maybe all of us, who live with this attitude, it's never enough. It's never enough. And so they look at their house and they say, it's not enough. And they look at their income and they say, it's not enough. And they open the closet doors and they say, there are not enough clothes in here. And they look at their car, it's not enough. And they look at their spouse, she or he is not enough. And some people even look at their children and say, they're not enough. My job's not enough. And we live under this illusion to think if we can get more, if we can get a little bit more and a little bit more, it'll finally get enough and we're going to be what? What's the answer? Happy. We're going to have joy. And she said, as Americans, we're on, it's like a treadmill, and we're running faster and faster. And if you've ever run on a treadmill, you just keep turning up the dial. And it says 5 miles an hour, it says 6 miles an hour, it says 7 miles an hour, and you just keep going faster and faster. And you can't run that fast because it's never enough in some people's mind. And she said the antidote to that, and this is what captured my attention. She said the antidote, the vaccine, is to be able to stop in life and say, it is enough. It is enough. Which is exactly what Paul is talking about. To be able to look at any circumstance of life and say, where God has me at this moment, it is enough. I think it was on one of the holidays, and it may have well been Christmas holiday, that our family was all together, and I had just figured this all out. I just read all this. I couldn't wait to tell all our family. So I had them all in the living room, and I said, I got to tell you this principle. And what we've all got to learn is to reach points in our lives, no matter what the circumstances, to say, it's enough. It's enough. We're okay. And I remember Jeannie, our daughter, saying, well, Daddy, and she's grown, does that mean we can never get a new car? Does it mean we can never do? I said, no, that doesn't mean that. You can dream your dreams. You can have your aspirations. But don't let waiting for those and wanting those ruin today. You got to stop and say, today, where God has me, I'm going to live as though it is enough. And I can tell you through the years, I have tried to practice that over and over again. It hasn't worked all that well, but I'm trying to tell myself, it's enough. This is what God has me in right now. You remember as I began this series, I told you I just finished this book by David Green, the founder, owner, CEO of Hobby Lobby. I marveled at one part of the book where he said, there's not one thing in this world I want. There's not one thing I want for myself. He said, I could go buy an island. I don't want to buy an island. I could buy a home here and a home there for vacation homes. I don't want them. And what good is another new car? He said, I've got all I want, except I want the world to hear about Jesus Christ. And I thought, is it possible to get in this life to a point where I really don't want very many things? I really don't want much. And I've been trying to talk to myself about that lately. Ken, what do you really want? Are there more things you want? I don't want. If the farm comes up to sale right next to ours, I don't want it. What do I want? Much less what do I need, which I don't need much of anything. Paul says you have to learn how to live like this. And yes, you may be like Michelle in the hospital right now, and she wants out of the hospital. I know she wants out of the hospital. And I know she wants to get well. But somehow you have to learn, even in that space, to say, God has me here, and I'm going to make the most of it. Jack's not here today because Jack's not feeling quite as well as he wants to feel. You may want to be better, but right now I got to be happy where I am and recognize his space. So one other thing Paul said in that little passage. You can't do this by yourself. He said, I learned it. I learned how to do it, but it wasn't by myself. It wasn't by my own strength. He helped me. I learned I could do all these things through him who gives me strength. I don't believe you can change, like I said last week, the way you think. I don't believe you can get into a habit of taking every concern of your life and giving it over to God and thus be satisfied. I don't believe you can do anything we've talked about unless you keep going back to saying, Jesus is the Lord of my life, and I'm going to act like it and live like it. And he offers that to us. That's what he offers to us. He says, I'm here. My spirit lives inside of you. I'm never away from you. Would you please live like it? That's really what he's saying. Would you please live like it? Would you please live with that reality? Would you walk through life with a balance in your step, knowing I'm in you, I'm with you. I'll get you through this one way or another. Does that make a difference in how we live? I sure hope it does, lest I waste my time up here. Because it's all about Jesus. And Jesus is saying, I am bringing you a life of freedom from your sin. I'm bringing you a life that's free from do's and don'ts. I'm bringing you a life that's free from worry. I'm bringing you a life where you can say, what I have now, it's enough, and still dream your dreams and pursue your dreams. But don't ruin today for tomorrow. And Jesus, he's helping us. He wants to help us live differently, truly differently. So we don't moan and we don't groan. Do you know, one last thing, you know that sin so easily comes from discontentment? Do you know that discontented, unsatisfied people like to gossip about those who do have what they want? And they like to slander them? And they like to cheat? And they so easily fall into adultery? And Jesus says, wait a minute, back up. Just live a satisfied life knowing that I'm in control. Live like it. Act like it. So I'm trying to. And I'm not doing a very good job. Because like Sue's, I haven't liked the changes I'm seeing in the last little bit of time. But then I step back and think about it and say, there's more to come. There are more changes to come. And they're coming very rapidly. You know, talking about grandkids, two years. And the other last two we have will be going off. I mean, there's more to come. And anything could change at any moment. Radically, actually. Will we keep living full and rich lives in Christ? That's what he came and died for. That's what he came to purchase for us.